Imagine this, you're sitting all alone on Christmas Eve. The world outside is glowing with laughter, families are together, children's voices fill the air, and yet, you sit in silence. No one calls. No one cares if you've eaten. You're invisible on the happiest night of the year. Now, ask yourself, what if a stranger, a little girl you've never met, walked up to you and asked, "Do you want to have dinner with us?" Would you accept? Or would you push her away like the rest of the world once pushed you? Tonight, you'll find out what happened when a lonely CEO faced that very moment. Richard Cole was one of the most powerful CEOs in the city. His company's glass skyscraper stood tall against the skyline, his name carried weight in boardrooms, and his signature on a paper meant fortunes could be made or lost. But behind the prestige, he lived in emptiness. His family had grown distant, his marriage had ended years ago, and his hunger for success had left him with everything money could buy but no one to share it with. It was Christmas Eve. Snow dusted the streets, families rushed home with presents, and carolers sang on corners. But Richard sat inside a small, dimly lit diner, a place he had chosen because no one would recognize him there. A half-empty cup of coffee sat in front of him, untouched, growing colder by the minute. He looked out the window, watching strangers laugh and embrace, their faces glowing in the warm light of love. And in that moment, Richard felt the crushing weight of loneliness pressing harder than ever before. Across the diner, a young couple entered with their daughter, a little girl no older than 7. She wore a red Christmas dress, her hair tied with a green ribbon, her eyes sparkling with innocence. They took a booth nearby, their laughter filling the silence Richard carried like a heavy coat. The little girl noticed him, an older man in a suit, sitting all alone, staring at nothing. She watched him for a while, her heart somehow sensing the sadness in his eyes. Finally, she slid off her seat and walked over. Richard barely noticed her until a small voice broke through his storm of thoughts. "Excuse me, sir," she said softly, Do you want to have dinner with us?" Richard blinked, stunned. For a moment, he thought he had misheard. "Dinner," he repeated, his voice almost breaking. "Yes," the little girl nodded. "My mommy says no one should be alone on Christmas. We have food, and my daddy makes the best turkey. You can sit with us if you want." Richard's throat tightened. No one had spoken to him with such kindness in years. He glanced at her parents, who smiled warmly, nodding their approval. Part of him wanted to say no, he was a stranger, a man too broken to belong at anyone's table. But the other part, the part that had been quietly begging for human connection, whispered yes. With hesitant steps, Richard followed her back to their booth. The little girl scooted closer to make room for him, as if she had just brought home someone important. And in a way, she had. At first, Richard felt awkward. He didn't know what to say, where to place his hands, or how to smile naturally. But the warmth of their small family began melting his icy walls. They asked about his favorite holiday memories, his childhood, and even teased him about not knowing how to properly crack open a Christmas cracker. He laughed, a sound he hadn't heard from himself in years. The little girl offered him half her cookie, insisting he couldn't celebrate Christmas without something sweet. And for the first time in decades, Richard felt what it was like to be seen, not as a CEO, not as a powerful man, but simply as a human being in need of love. Hours passed like minutes. By the time the diner was closing, Richard realized he had experienced something he thought he had lost forever: belonging. As they prepared to leave, the girl hugged him tightly. "Merry Christmas," she whispered. "Merry Christmas," Richard said, his voice thick with emotion. That night, he went home differently than he had arrived. The emptiness was still there, but now there was a spark of warmth inside it. He thought about how a single act of kindness, a little girl's invitation, had cracked open the door to his lonely heart. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late for him to open it wider. Viewers, if you're still with me, remember this: sometimes the smallest gesture can save someone's soul. It doesn't cost money to smile, to invite, to reach out to the one sitting alone. Richard was a man with everything yet nothing, until one child reminded him that love cannot be bought, only shared. So tonight, ask yourself, who in your life is sitting alone at the table of silence? And will you be the one to walk up and say, "Do you want to have dinner with us?"